Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always by co-host Nick Filato for today's emergency podcast. As we like to call them, the Giants just made a trade out of nowhere. They dealt the seventh round pick, which I know, look, Jordan Riley looks pretty good so far in camp. But guess what? For the most part, these seventh round picks are dumps. A lot of times they don't even make the roster in year one. I am perfectly fine taking that swing for Isaiah Simmons, the linebacker slash safety slash edge, whatever you want to call him at this point, slash slot defender, because we'll go over that. But he played a wide variety of snaps at a wide variety of positions last year, similar to Xavier McKinney in a sense of just playing a lot of different positions. A player who, I'll be honest, Nick, we kind of liked in the 2020 draft class. And I really liked his film at Clemson. I thought he could be really fun, depending on which defensive coordinator got him. Didn't work out for him in Arizona, obviously. New coaching staff now there that also felt like that wasn't the case. But I got to feel like they could have got something better than a seventh round pick for Isaiah Simmons because, look, he still had some productive snaps for them. Even last year, I'm looking at the numbers. And so I was very surprised by this move from their standpoint. But from the Giants standpoint, Nick, I mean, to trade a seventh round pick for a player who could potentially be the perfect fit for a Wink Martindale system and to get a positional player that the Giants currently don't have, like they have no athleticism outside of Bobby Okereke at linebacker whatsoever, right? They also don't really have, in my opinion, much upside. No offense, Micah McFadden, no offense. Like we have to take things at face value and understand this is a Giants podcast. We love every player they draft, but in reality, Micah McFadden and Darian Beavers have a lot of limitations from a long-term standpoint at the linebacker position. And so they get someone who has more athleticism, more upside than anyone on the roster currently besides Okereke. And so, man, I am extremely excited about this deal for the Giants. It's another low-cost swing. We'll talk about that as well, Nick. But what was your initial reaction? Obviously, you're also down there in Arizona, so you probably have heard a little bit of these rumblings about Isaiah Simmons maybe on the move.
I did, Dan. My initial reaction, I was out walking my dog, and I'm just like, oh, shit, I need to get back. So I'm like, let's go, Phoenix. So we come back. But yesterday I was driving, and I just happened to switch to sports talk radio. And they mention like how much they're going to suck. And it's, very dreary, lugubrious type of radio out there for their sports teams. Similar to New York, I guess. But Isaiah Simmons' name got brought up. And they were talking about trading him. And they're like, what are we going to get for him? He's 25 years old. I don't want to trade a former 8th overall pick in the 2020 draft just over 3 years ago for a 4th round pick. And I started thinking, I'm like, the Giants make a lot of sense. Wink Martindale runs a positionless defense. I don't know if the Giants are going to trade a 4th, though, for a guy who's going to be a free agent next year. But I didn't realize he was up for grabs for a 7th, Dan. If I knew that connection's right there, because what does Wink Martindale preach? He preaches length. He preaches speed. He preaches positionless defense. That is a check in the box of Isaiah Simmons. And you get this guy for nothing at 25 years old. If there's any defensive coordinator who's going to find a way to leverage this guy's talents, it is Wink Martindale. We'll get into that from an X's and O's and a scheme perspective because there's a lot to bite into there.
There is a lot to bite into there. And I think some of the key points as to why we're both so excited about this trade for the Giants is the age factor, 25 years old, the positionless factor, the idea that we have a defensive coordinator here, Wink Martindale. This is where I'm most excited first, Nick. Like I have a lot of different layers to my excitement with Isaiah Simmons. There's the less likely layer to reach, which is, can he be an all-around player for them? Somebody who they can eventually play on a lot of snaps at that linebacker position with Bobby Okereke, in the sense that not only are they playing him at the linebacker position, essentially they're like, how we talked about how Wink Martindale last year used a lot of dime and even quarter more than any defensive coordinator in the NFL. And just for those who don't know, we're talking about one linebacker on the field or fewer. But I almost wonder if they can get, this is the pinnacle if it reaches this point, but the ceiling for Simmons, if they reach it, you're playing dime or quarter, whatever you want to call the package, but he's essentially like a safety and linebacker at the same time on the field. So it doesn't really matter what the package is technically called. It's just a matter of, do you feel confident with him on the field in these spots? That's the pinnacle. But I think at minimum, what they're going to get out of him right away, even if he doesn't reach that level, is somebody who they can scheme up one-on-one pass rush situations for in interesting spots. That's where I really think he first comes to mind to me, because we know one thing Wink Martindale loves to do is scheme his defense to get one-on-one matchups, and they don't just have to be for Kayvon Thibodeau, who the opposing offensive line is looking at every play, or Dexter Lawrence or whoever. It can be for this 4th or 5th type option, like an Isaiah Simmons, and he can add something to the pass rush game that, no offense, Tomlin Fox can't add. You know, Tomlin Fox doesn't have that level of athleticism, bend, and burst around the edge. He's a good player. He's not that. O'Shane Ximenez, same thing. Jahan Ward, like these guys don't have that level of burst and edge bend around the edge. So I'm really excited about that first.
I'm excited about that, but it even goes beyond that because we talk about options. Wink Martindale, give him options and he'll figure it out. And that's going to keep the offense and the offensive protection and the quarterback guessing like, oh, what the hell is number 9 going to do out there? That is what Isaiah Simmons offers tenfold, because not only can you scheme him 1v1, but Wink Martindale is a master scheming free rushers. And now you have a long, explosive, very quick off the break type of player like Isaiah Simmons coming in, crashing into the pocket. I put up a clip of a bunch of his sacks. A lot of his sacks were like that. They were either unblocked or was him running like a large loop and just using his incredible, unique athletic ability to close into the pocket and sack the quarterback. But it goes beyond just sacking the quarterback. It's also, I'm going to line you up on the line of scrimmage. Am I coming? Am I coming? Snap happens. Now I bail. Similar to how the Giants used O'Shane Ximenez so often. This is not great for O'Shane Ximenez. I don't know if O'Shane Ximenez playing with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter of preseason week 2 was a good sign of him making this roster anyways. But I expect Isaiah Simmons to come in and be that guy when the Giants line 7 on the line of scrimmage. He's going to be one of those 7. And he can be effective pass rushing. He can be effective as a free blitzer. He can be effective dropping into coverage. He has a ton of length. He's about 6'4", 240 pounds. There's just so much you can do with a player like this. And he hasn't even come close to scratching the potential that he showed when he was in college. If he can even get to 50% of that potential, then we're talking about an absolute unmitigated steal here.
I want to talk more about Simmons in a moment. And I think one of the points you just brought up is something I wanted to unpack a little bit, which is how much of what we saw last year on film was Wink Martindale using these guys who are lined up right on the edge of the line of scrimmage with the ability that on every snap to kind of keep that offense guessing. Are they going to drop? Are they going to rush? And he had some guys he could do that with. You saw it with Kayvon Thibodeau at times, even the preseason game. Azeez Ojulari. I would call those guys capable of doing that, but not as interesting, unique, and potentially high upside as doing that as an Isaiah Simmons type, because Isaiah Simmons has more athleticism than either of those players when dropping back and moving laterally into coverage. And he's not the blitzer those guys are. Obviously, he's not a pass rusher like them, but he has some ability there as well. But before we do that, I also want to talk about the overall 30,000-foot view and just the GM side of this thing from Joe Schoen to trade a 7th-round pick for a player like this. And we've discussed this in the past, Nick, specifically with the Darren Waller trade, using a 3rd-round pick, quote unquote, which really isn't a 3rd-round pick because it was 100th overall. It's essentially a 4th-round pick, right? Like the first picks of the 4th round are 102, 103, 104. That's a 4th-round pick. You can call it a 3 if you want. It's technically a 3. It's comp 3, so you're essentially giving a 4th-round pick. The type of players you can get there are like Darnay Holmes, right? Like sometimes you can hit, like you're going to take like occasionally you're going to get a Julian Love in that range, but for the most part, you're trading those types of players for a Darren Waller type, who, as we've seen throughout camp, as long as he can stay healthy, is still one of the more impact players in the NFL. He's 6'6", stronger than people realize, and incredibly fast for a tight end. He's a mismatch nightmare. He is one of the best players you can have when healthy on the roster. You give up a 100th pick overall for that. Now you give up a 7th-round pick for a player like Isaiah Simmons in a defense that needs a player like Isaiah Simmons with a coordinator who could potentially maximize him. And these are the kind of low-cost, high upside swings that we've wanted to see from the Giants GM for a while. This is part of how Howie Roseman built his quote unquote brand, how he's known now as the clear-cut best GM in the NFL by making these types of moves. He saw it this offseason with DeAndre Swift. He's done plenty in the past for the Eagles that have been even better than the Swift move. We don't know if that won't work out or not. Regardless, this is how you build a brand. This is how you do things to get an edge on the rest of the NFL. These types of moves. It's not trading a 4 and a 6 for Alec Ogletree. It's not trading, BJ Hill for out of the league Billy Price. It's not panicking and taking Sam Bill with your 3rd-round comp pick. It's doing things like this. And this is why I'm so excited about this move from the 30,000-foot view, because I now know the Giants have a GM who can do this stuff and who is going to do this stuff. It's going to be aggressive and active. Like, look, you said it best, like maybe there weren't good offers for Simmons, but the Giants might have been the first to the pot too, right? Think about your fantasy football leagues, right? It's the only thing I can equate this to, Nick. I was talking with you about before the pod. It's like, there are times in fantasy football where you talk trade with someone for a week and you make that trade, and then someone, or maybe it's not you, other members in your league make that trade, and then someone comes back to you and texts and be like, oh my God, you just gave up that for that? Why'd you do that? Why didn't you shop it around? It's like, it doesn't always work like that. You don't always shop around. You sometimes just do the deal. That could have been the case with Simmons and the Giants. Maybe the Cardinals were just like, we're going to cut him otherwise. He doesn't fit what we want to do. Let's just take a pick for him right now and move on and get forward. We're almost at cut day. So I'm really excited about that just from the 30,000 foot view.
It's what smart teams have been doing for a while, Dan. I mean, I hate to give so much praise to Howie Roseman, but the Eagles are a smart, well-run organization. Let's just be objective about it. The Ravens are another team. They went out and they traded for Calais Campbell, and everyone's like, oh, wow, they got Calais Campbell, one of the best defensive linemen. I think it was for like a fourth-round pick.
Fifth-round pick.
It was a fifth-round pick, and still that's 2 rounds, obviously, higher than what the Giants traded for Isaiah Simmons, and Isaiah Simmons isn't Calais Campbell, but there's still so much potential. There's this kid just turned 25 years old last month. He's 6'4", 238 pounds. He has like just ridiculous, a 98th percentile broad jump, 91st percentile vert, 98th percentile 40, ran a sub 4.4, and you can align him anywhere. He had significant snaps at slot corner, has played safety. You can put him on the edge. You can put him at linebacker. We know Wink Martindale makes his safeties align in the A gap and then go and cover like a middle of the field closed look, just do absolute crazy shit. Isaiah Simmons has the capability to do that and to rush the passer and to do all of this in a 6'4", 238-pound frame. So there's just a lot that you can generate from this player. He offers you a lot of options, and I think Wink Martindale is going to find a way to leverage those options.
You're so right, Nick. And the last thing you said there, it's just so many ways to offshoot this because there's so much potential intrigue, in my opinion, with how they could use him and how, in my mind, he can rise to a player that he hasn't been in the NFL given this spot. And why do I think that? Like, you're thinking this might be a big jump to make, right? He's been in the NFL for a few years, hasn't worked out. But sometimes the situation is everything, right? Sometimes the coaching means everything in these spots. He could be landing in a situation with the right coach that gets the most out of him. And he may have never had those opportunities with past coaches. You just brought up something about like how we see sometimes on film, Wink will have some guy all the way up in the box at the line of scrimmage, looking like he's going to blitz and then dropping into the middle of like an inverted cover, like weird ass coverage look. And guess what? Isaiah Simmons started to play a little bit of safety for the Cardinals. I read an article from earlier this offseason where Simmons told the coaches that he would prefer not to play. And this was, he told Gannon and the new coaches in Arizona. This was from a month. Let me see when this was from. This is from Cardinals.com. It's an interesting article from August 7th. This was less than a month ago. Simmons says, they asked Simmons before the offseason, where do you see yourself? He says, I told him I don't want to play linebacker. I felt more comfortable getting back to things I had done in the past last season. And that was when he played a little bit more safety. And he was talking about how Buda Baker's taking him under his wing. Also, by the way, he said, like, if they came here and said, you're going to be a Mike linebacker, I would have done that. I would have done it to the best of my ability. And that's an important thing to note here, Nick, by the way, that I was going to get to a little bit later. But this is not like a character concern issue. He wasn't traded for a 7th because of character issues or anything like that. All reports from the pre-draft process say he was a great teammate, great character guy. Dexter Lawrence came out and said this guy's going to bring charisma to the Giants, and he's a great teammate to have. And even DeAndre Hopkins, who played for the Cardinals last year, tweeted immediately after the trade, like, the Giants got Isaiah Simmons for a 7th rounder. Laugh out loud. This is an incredible trade. Like, maybe he's taking a little shade on his former team, the Cardinals, but even so, obviously, that's a good news for the Giants. I don't think you're worried about that type of issue with Isaiah Simmons. Almost, I think he's going to do the opposite. But it is interesting to me to hear him say, I feel better and more comfortable playing in that back half at the safety position. And that's what tells me, like, he can, if they want him to, they can put him up in the line of scrimmage, drop him all the way into the deep half, and he's going to have the recovery ability to get there.
We're going to see looks like this for the people watching on YouTube. You have Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons sugaring the A gap. They're both communicating. Zaven Collins acts like he's blitzing, makes contact, just drops, and then nobody picks up Isaiah Simmons, and he's just going to run in free. You're going to see a lot of free rushes for players like Isaiah Simmons, Kayvon Thibodeau. We saw it last year as well, but Isaiah Simmons is so quick out of his break and so explosive that he can beat, like he did here, a block that's just slightly late. Like 67 right here, this guard. He notices Isaiah Simmons looping behind Marcus Golden and then keeping it really tight to the inside shoulder of, I think that's Brian O'Neill. And Brian O'Neill has to block Marcus Golden. So then 67, Ed Ingram, I think that is, has to kick all the way over. And look how explosive Isaiah Simmons is to beat that, barely get affected, and then force a fumble and recover the fumble. I'm not saying Isaiah Simmons is going to come in here and beat Lawrence Taylor, because he's not. But he gives you a lot of options. And the way this scheme is devised, Wink Martindale talked about this yesterday, Dan. It's like, it's not about individual sack numbers. You have to be selfless here. But when you have a player like Isaiah Simmons who can do all of those different wide-ranging variety of roles, then you can position him to not only come away with sacks like that, but also drop in coverage, like I said before, and you can use him in a manner that is just going to force the offense to really be guessing the entire time. The offense is not going to know what the hell this guy is doing until he is coming on the blitz or dropping, until his intentions are declared. And also with O'Shane Ximines out there, as much as I think O'Shane probably overachieved last year relative to what we all expected, if you say hike, if you're a quarterback and you catch the snap and you see 53 dropping off the line of scrimmage, you're like, oh, I got 2 receivers over there against 50. I'm going to take that. Isaiah Simmons can mask that, right? Isaiah Simmons being out there is like, shit, number 9's out there, whatever his number is going to be. He's pretty quick. I don't think I can exploit him as a vulnerability in terms of coverage because he is so explosive. Now, where Isaiah Simmons, where I guess some concern might be able to come in, and I'm not too privy to this yet, I haven't gotten to the film, is how is he as a run defender, handling, stacking, and shedding blocks. But the thing is, he's not going to have to be out there on those downs when you have Michael McFadden and Darian Beavers who do that at least an adequate rate.
Right. And I think at least early on, you probably won't see him much on those downs. And that's not a problem because the passing downs are the ones that win in the NFL anyway. What did the Giants do last year? They were like 28th in defensive DVOA, right? Yet it seems odd to think about that because their defense we don't have too many games last year where the Giants gave up like 30, 40 points or whatever, right? The Giants averaged 18-point games 18 points a game and still won 9 games. So obviously the defense was doing something. What were they doing? They were really good in the red zone. They were really good on third downs. Those are the downs where Isaiah Simmons is going to be on the field impacting the play as a blitzer or, like you said, dropping into coverage. Either way, he's not really in those spots going to have to worry about his run defense. And the Giants are going to have to worry about that either. Yes, some teams will run on third down in the red zone, but it's mostly not going to be a lot of that. And the plays you brought up there on film and you showed there, the first play, yes, it's a free rush or free blitz. But either way, we saw Wink Martindale do a ton of that last year. It's not a bad thing that he has the quickness, acceleration, and ability in that 10-yard box to kind of get to the quarterback. But that second rep, dude, against the Vikings, to me, like just watching that on film right now from you putting it up there, Nick, that's a pretty damn special rep. Like, I don't care what anyone says. I'm going to rewatch that again after this and confirm what I thought I saw, Nick. But I don't think there's too many players in the NFL who could have got around. Like when you talk about Ed Ingram trying to come around there and impact that pass rush and get his hand on it, he redirects him slightly on this play. But look at how quickly Isaiah Simmons is able to kind of flip his hips and turn back to the quarterback and then get the football. Like that level of bend, that level of lateral agility, and that's natural. That's not like you don't have, like, no offense. Again, I'm not trying to do this to knock our players. It's just I don't have anyone to compare him to. Like, no offense, but Darian Beaver and Michael McFadden aren't doing that, right, Nick? Like, this is not an offensive thing to say. It's just a reality of a situation. I don't know whom, and you could go across the NFL roster by roster, and there's probably not too many people who are able to do this on an NFL roster right now, in my personal opinion.
From an athletic and a length standpoint, and the way he just avoids the contact from Ingram, how he kind of like jumps around, uses his hands to protect himself, does get affected and altered a little bit. But then watch him just short, choppy steps to reorient his hips into the pocket, and then just goes right at Kirk Cousins to knock that football away. It was a very nice play. It was a very nice play.
Like, it's an awesome rep. It's an elite level rep. I know he hasn't been an elite level player, but this is an elite rep. Wink Martindale sees this. Wink Martindale's like, let me do things that are going to, accentuate what he's able to do right now as a football player at 25 years old. By the way, Nick, he's only a $1.01 million cap hit for the Giants this year. I know a lot of people on Twitter have been asking me what is going to happen. What's the cap hit? Look, he's on the 4th year of his rookie contract as a first round pick in the top whatever. Is it going to be expensive? Can the Giants afford this? Well, the way the NFL structured these contracts, like the Cardinals have, the most of the cap hit is not going to the Giants here. Just $1.01 million cap hit for the Giants, which is awesome, by the way, because the Giants don't have an unlimited amount of cap space right now, and they want to keep some cap space open in season for injuries. Let's transition a little bit to some other things I wanted to talk about with Simmons. So just to give everyone a reminder of what he was, because remember, he's 25 years old. He's zero, and unless I'm mistaken, Nick, he has no major injuries at 25 years old, because I don't remember any so far in his career with the Cardinals. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm pretty sure that's correct.
He was injured a little bit in 2020, but it wasn't anything major.
No major surgeries. So he came into the NFL 6'3", 5'8", almost 6'4". He ran a 4.39 at 238. And again, hasn't had an ACL, hasn't had an MCL, hasn't had a major injury. So you have to assume he's the same athlete he was coming out. He had an RAS score of 9.97, one of the highest scores ever given to a linebacker. 4.39 40, like I talked about, elite 20-yard split at 2.58, elite 10-yard split. And we saw that on the pass rush rep that Nick put up a little while ago, that sack where he just shot through the A-gap. That was an elite 10-yard split of 1.55. Vertical jump, 39 inches, elite. Broad jump over 11 feet, elite. I mean, this is an elite, explosive athlete with incredible short area acceleration and long 40-yard type distance speed to himself. This is a real big athlete. Here's the snap breakdown, Nick, of what he had the last 2 years per PFF. Shout out Doug Analytics for this, by the way, our boy over there, Dougie Analytics. 2022, he played 17 games for the Cardinals. He played 46% over the slot, 45% in the box or on the defensive line, and 6% in the deep half at safety. In 2021, 17 games as well, he played only 15% over the slot, 76% in the box or the D line. And I think that goes to what he was saying about playing more linebacker, not liking it as much. And then 2% out wide at corner, which I thought was interesting too. And no snaps in the deep half as a safety. What do you make? I want to ask you this, Nick. What do you make of those snap breakdowns? Or more importantly, how would you project right now, if you had to guess and you had to make a projection, Nick, how would you project Wink Martindale will use him from a percentage standpoint?
Percentage standpoint, I think he's going to operate a lot in the box, which means linebacker, but somebody who's crowding the line of scrimmage and also as an edge rusher, a rotational edge. I think they will use him in the backfield a little bit, but mainly a lot of those snaps that are safety snaps, they're actually in the box because they're starting in the box, so they're counted as box snaps. Now, where is he going to end up post-snap? That's a completely different story. I think he will end up in deep parts of the field. I think he's going to end up man covering some tight ends in certain situations when you want Xavier McKinney handling a different role. So I think it's going to start small. I think it's going to start with just pressure packages on third down to see how he adapts and evolves within this defense. And then hopefully that role can be expanded to a more like further away from the line of scrimmage. I still think his skill set can be harnessed to there as well because he is so fast and so long. It's just, can he handle that? We'll have to wait and see. Right now, I think it's just going to start as basically a glorified O'Shane Ximenez role plus, just because he offers much more.
I think you nailed that, Nick. That would be my projection as well. I would say that I would say it's possible we start to see him mix in as an inside linebacker. I don't know if we're going to see too many snaps as a safety, but I'm also intrigued by the idea of it, just considering how many times the Giants used 3 safeties on the field last season.
Agreed. But again, what exactly does that mean? Like the quarter package had 4 safeties out on the field at certain points. You're going to see big dime and quarter, and he's going to be in those packages. And sometimes he might not be on the line of scrimmage, depending on what the Giants are going to do. He might be right next to Bobby Okereke in the big dime package and be that linebacker. I think he would thrive in that role. But I also think the Giants are going to want to crowd the line of scrimmage with him because what is he going to do? You don't know as an offense. You just have no idea what he's going to do because he can offer you so many things.
I think you nailed it there. And that's such a big part of what Wink does too, right? Like he puts all these guys on the line of scrimmage. And if you have one of these guys like a Simmons type, or in his mind, I feel like he feels this way with Thibodeau and Ojulari as well, Nick, that he feels comfortable being lined all the way up on the line of scrimmage before the snap. And yet if he needs him to drop the depth, he's so comfortable despite him being pressed all the way up on the line of scrimmage, that player can drop to depth and still execute the play the way that Wink Martindale wants him to. That's probably why I think you're right. He's going to be on the line of scrimmage a lot because so much of what they do, it's that bluff pressure, right? The simulated pressures. We talked about that a lot last year when we broke down the film, how Wink Martindale loves the simulated pressures. Well, if you're an opposing offense and you're trying to, let's say you're a quarterback and you're trying to get your offensive line check set before the snap at the line of scrimmage, like you have Isaiah Simmons on the line of scrimmage and all these other guys, it's really difficult to figure out where the pressure is going to come from. And I think that's what Wink's, if I was thinking the core of what Wink Martindale's philosophy is as a coordinator, it's that. It's getting the offensive line and the offense to have to guess before the snap where the pressure is coming from because they're always trying to bring pressure in this system. And that's probably the most exciting thing I think about Isaiah Simmons right now.
Absolutely. Pressure breaks pipes, but the illusion of pressure can also break pipes, especially when you bring the pressure and the pressure is there a lot. And a simulated pressure, too, is when you act as if you're going to send more than 4. You only end up sending 4, but one of the 4 is not a traditional rusher. So it's not a defensive lineman or an edge. So you drop somebody off the line of scrimmage and you send another 4. In Wink Martindale's scheme, it's just there's 7 on the line of scrimmage. And sometimes there's one defensive lineman out there. It's just like Dexter Lawrence. Who is the traditional rusher in that case? Because it's a positionless defense. Isaiah Simmons embodies that.
And that's cool too, because I at least feel like from a schematic standpoint, watching the game, Nick, that you get an edge as a defense when you have that style, right? And I know Wink Martindale talked a lot about this earlier this week, and it's just interesting to hear him say, like, look, I know most defenses these days are just rushing 4 and dropping 7 and playing that type of coverage, but that's not who I am, and that's not what we're going to be about. And in addition to just being the ziggers while everyone else is zagging, which I love in general, because I think you can get value from that. I've talked about this in the past on other types of podcasts like fantasy, but I think it works for the NFL too. I just like the idea of bringing pressure and enforcing, like, on the offense, you have to adjust to us. We're not gonna drop and let you do what you want to do. You have to, and it works so well. Like for some of those earlier games when they face like Baker Mayfield and like those types of quarterbacks, Nick. And obviously they didn't do it against Trevor Lawrence, which I think says a lot about what Wink Martindale feels about Lawrence's ability to process this early in his career. But against those types of quarterbacks, it's such a good way to play because don't let them get comfortable. Throw them off their game early.
We heard Wink Martindale praise Aaron Rodgers this week. And because the Giants are going up against the Jets and he's going to get his first action as a Jet quarterback. Let's go back to that game. He brought the pressure a little bit, and he talked about the chess match with Aaron Rodgers and with Wink Martindale and how much respect he has for Aaron Rodgers. But you go back to some of that game, there were some times where Xavier McKinney was flying off the edge. I think he had a couple PBUs, knocking balls down at the line of scrimmage. Kayvon Thibodeau as well. They were loading the line of scrimmage. I remember in London against Green Bay, there were 1st and 10s near the red zone or in the red zone where the Giants were in quarter. The Giants were like, oh, you have Aaron Rodgers. We're going to prioritize speed. We don't think your blocking and your running game is as physical enough. So I'm guessing Aaron Jones was in the game because if it was A.J. Dillon, that's very, very bold. But it's also a testament to Wink Martindale having confidence in the Nick McLeods and the Jason Pinnocks and the Xavier McKinneys and the Julian Loves at that time because they were physical defensive backs. You can look at Isaiah Simmons and be like, is he a physical defensive back or an undersized linebacker? Where are we here? Because he, again, just gives you those options to use him in whichever way you want to use him.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this, Nick, for exactly why you said. We went over it. I want to say one more thing because I talked earlier about how he's had no injuries and really should be around the same athlete he was. Well, here we go. I have a stat up here from last season on Isaiah Simmons had a pick 6 at one point. And on that play, on that pick 6, according to Next Gen Analytics, shout out again, Doug Analytics for posting this, or Next Gen NFL Stats, I should say. Isaiah Simmons reached a top speed of 20.68 miles per hour on that pick 6. It was the fastest recorded speed for any linebacker all season. So there you go, right there. That's the proof. It's the proof in the pudding right there that this dude is still as fast as he timed out at the combine. An insane number, 4.39 at 238 pounds. Like that's just absolutely bonkers type of speed for that type of size. And I'm just really excited about adding that to the Giants defense.
There's probably plays where Isaiah Simmons was even faster than that too. I was at that game with that pick 6 at 20.6 miles per hour. That was against the Saints on Thursday Night Football. And I think Andy Dalton threw like 2 pick 6s or something with like 2 minutes to go in the first half. One of them was to Isaiah Simmons. And he was running it towards the end zone where I was sitting way up in the rafters because that's how I roll.
Yeah, look, that's how we all roll right now. As far as going to games, for the most part, not all of us. Maybe some of you listening have some money, some more money in your bank accounts. But anyway, about Simmons. Look, again, I think we've gone over a lot here. The main breakdown here is the Giants traded for a 25-year-old linebacker with 4.39 speed at 238 pounds, but he's not just a linebacker. He's going to play a full array of roles here in Wink Martindale's defense. He's going to be on the line of scrimmage, mostly we're excited for, as either somebody who's going to be able to blitz and offer a new level of blitzing ability that they don't really have outside of the big guys, or drop in coverage, be completely versatile from that standpoint. Simulated pressures, they're going to be there. Isaiah Simmons is going to be another factor there. $1.01 million cap hit is negligible right now. I mean, that's what you pay the back end 5th and 6th rounders that are on the roster playing special teams at this point. So, I mean, look, Nick, this is as high upside a move as you can make, in my opinion, as low a cost as you can make, right? $1.01 million cap hit with a 7th round pick. That's nothing. You're giving up nothing at that point, essentially. I mean, I think at one point the Giants traded what for Riley Dixon, the punter? Did they give up like a 4th round pick or something insane for that? It was like a comp pick. Maybe it was a 6th round pick. But like that's what they traded a 6th for a bad punter that they then re-signed to a big contract. That's the type of moves that Dave Gettleman made, right? We're trading a 6th round pick for a punter, re-signing him to a bad deal that's against the cap, and then we can't cut him because he's got dead money on the cap. Now we're trading a 1 round later for a 25-year-old linebacker with a $1.01 million cap hit, who's immediately going to be somebody who can blitz the quarterback very least. So it's a very exciting move.
I think it was a 7th, a conditional 7th for Riley Dixon. Maybe it turned into a 6th
though, because they re-signed him for a big deal.
Yeah, that's so insane.
It's insane. That's just off bad moves left and right. It was insane.
It's a different regime.
Good job, and Dexter Lawrence. He did 2 good things. Thank you, and Daniel.
Yeah, but anything else? Anything else you want to say about Dave Gettleman?
It's just funny to me that was like the trade back in the day, and now it's like this. It's just such a different dichotomy right there. So different.
I know it's crazy. The decision by John Mara to fire Joe Judge and to clean house and to bring in a fresh perspective has completely altered this franchise in such a short amount of time. Think about even before last season, our podcast was a little higher on the Giants at the time because I think we bought into the coaching, but there were a lot of people on Giants Twitter who thought the Giants, and a lot of beat reporters like the Giants are going to be terrible. Daniel Jones sucks. Look at where we're at now. Our opinions of this team are so much higher than they were even last year. It's because we've seen it on the football field, and we've seen the coaching, and we've seen the development of a lot of these young players who were just stagnating under the prior regime. So it's a great place to be. This is going to be a tough season. It's a tough schedule. It's a lot tougher schedule than last year. The Giants win a couple division games, and they should be bound for the playoffs, but still a lot of things that have to happen until then.
Yep, they do. But look, Nick, one final thing to note here. For about the last 3 years during draft season, you and I have been saying, are we ever going to draft an athletic linebacker that we feel has, right? We feel adds a different level to that second level. Can he be somebody who can drop in coverage? Can he be somebody who you can match up against the big slot or against, in sometimes, like a skinnier slot? Because yes, Xavier McKinney did a good job of that, especially on the stretch. But I know you're like me, Nick. You would rather the Giants be able to deploy McKinney all over the field, in the deep half where he can ball hawk, as a robber, like in different ways. You don't want to always just be like, all right, the only option we have to cover the slot is McKinney, so I guess we have to play him there, right? We can't afford to put Darnay there. Now, with Simmons in the mix, that's also upside. Like, I don't think it's going to happen right away, maybe, Nick. But there is upside to potentially have a new guy to cover these matchups in the slot too, which also has me excited. And that's what we've wanted with second-level linebacker athleticism, right? We talked a lot about last year how we felt the linebackers weren't doing a good job on film of getting into passing lanes, presenting themselves in passing lanes, getting their hands up, deflecting balls. Well, Isaiah Simmons has the length that you talked about, right, Nick? He has the recoverability. He has the athleticism. Maybe he can be the guy who gets in pass lanes. Maybe he can be the guy that impacts the passing game simply by being in those lanes.
All right, let's go with best worst case scenario from this trade before we get out of here. So worst case scenario, that's if he makes the team, which we're all imagining he's going to, is he's a situational player who doesn't really find the field because he can't put it all together, but he might be a very good special teams gunner for you. That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario is he is going to form a very formidable linebacking tandem with Bobby Okereke next to him. And he's also going to give you that type of positional versatility on third down and passing situations. It's not crazy to think that best case scenario can materialize right now.
No, it's not crazy to think. And I think to add to that, Nick, the most likely situation is the middle ground where he is still going to be an impact player on the situational downs you mentioned, the third downs in the red zone. And that's where this Giants defense cashed in anyway last year. And that's what they're always going to be about. Winks talked about it. He doesn't care about the overall DVOA or the total defense number at the end. He just wants to not put points on the board. Get off the field on third down, get off the field in the red zone, and make those 3 instead of 7. I remember watching Quarterback episode a couple nights ago. I'm finally watching that show on Netflix. And Mahomes was talking about how crazy the difference is when you get 7 versus 3 in the red zone, and how much of a difference it ends up being at the end of a game in the final score and in winning and losing. And we know about that. We've talked about that forever. The Joe Judge Giants were constantly selling for 3 in the red zone. Obviously, Kafka has changed that. Like, Giants were 7th best red zone offense. It's a big reason why they won 9 games. And same thing goes on the defense side of the ball. Big reason why the Giants won 9 games because Wink Martindale was good in the red zone. And that's going to continue with Simmons.
Do you remember week 2 of the 2021 season? The Washington game.
Do I remember? Do you remember what happened that night? That was when Matt Schneider made his podcast debut.
I know.
Shout out Matt Schneider, by the way. Also shout out Ron Schneider, by the way, because after this trade, Nick was doing something, I was doing something for work. We couldn't record right away, and my dad was like, "Emergency pod." He just sent me a text that just said, "Emergency pod, Dan." It didn't say please. It didn't ask for it. It wasn't like, "Are you going to do one?" It was just, "We need an emergency pod." So here we are with the emergency pod.
Exactly. Yeah, we need the emergency pod for
sure. All right. That's all we have for today on the Big Blue Banter podcast. Keep it locked and loaded. If you enjoy the show, remember, hit the like button. Just please hit that like button. Here's what it requires out of you. You move your hand like I'm doing right now. You move it over to your cursor on your thing, and you just click. And that's it. It's free. Doesn't cost you any money. You expended very little energy. But what it does for us is it helps our show build. It pushes this show up the algorithm on YouTube so other people can see it. And then when other people see it, as Nick and I like to talk about off pod, but we don't want to brag too much on pod. It's probably the first time I've said it, but I will. Once people watch our show, they tend to stay with our show. And that's what we feel confident in saying. So we need to get people to see the show in the first place. And the way to do that is to hit subscribe, to hit like, to share this with your friends, do whatever you need to do if you want to help us grow. And we appreciate that. Like, that's something that goes between both of us, and it really helps us. And we continue to deliver the content as long as people listen, but the only way we can do it is if people listen. It's a two-way street there. So, and other thing, if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, just please make sure you download these pods. Don't just hit play. Download is the key there. And we don't care if you download and then delete like that. I've always suggested you do that so you save space on your phones, but just please hit download. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week. And obviously we'll talk to you soon.